All right, welcome to Live with Faye. We're on YouTube, and I thank our viewers for coming in every evening and supporting us. Yesterday, we had quite a strong turnout, and I'm hoping that we'll have a similar turnout this evening because the conversation that we're about to have is just as important. Now, I don't need to remind you that we're in the middle of a pandemic, but some of the details that we should talk about are the central government's finances, so the state of the finances of the central government. All right, welcome to Live with Faye. We're on YouTube. The state of affairs of the central government and what money they have and what money they're spending. Just to remind our viewers, this is not a television debate. This is a discussion where we've brought in people who understand the issue, perhaps better than the rest of us, to be able to give us different points of view and to also help us understand the matter better so we can form a more educated opinion. All right, so just to remind you where we're coming from. Now, the central government reportedly told a parliamentary panel on, that it cannot pay GST compensation to states in the near future because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this is a report from the News Minute that I'm reading out. That's actually from yesterday. And the reason why the central government can't compensate the states for their loss on GST is because they say that there is a sharp slump in tax collections due to COVID and the lockdown and the economic downturn. So here we have the central government telling state governments that, listen, we do not have the money that we owe you, and so we cannot pay you right now. Now, this is something that should worry us a great deal. The central government says that it's because people have not been able to pay tax because businesses are not making any money. If they don't make any money, they don't pay tax on the profits. Remember, you only pay tax on the profits. And so if you're running into losses, no taxes will come in. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. Now, we've had several points of view on the Indian economy pointing out that the economy is still deeply in trouble. And it's going to be a fairly long time before we see the economy pick up. In that case, the central government is still going ahead with the very ambitious Central Vista project, which will cost, hold your breath, 20,000 crore rupees. Now, the Central Vista project is a redevelopment project. In the city of Mumbai, where I live, we redevelop slums all the time, where they knock down the slums and they build a tower in its place. One never thought of that as Parliament. So this Central Vista project is a redevelopment of the 3-kilometer space between, the India Gate and Rajghat, where, just to give you a point of view, if you're watching from other parts of the country, where the Republic Day parade happens every year, that entire stretch where people are marching and where the floats go through, that entire stretch has Parliament, North Block, South Block, and it has various government buildings on either side. Now, that entire stretch is to be redeveloped. So what's the problem? The first problem is with the cost of 20,000 crore rupees. One wonders if we can afford it at this point. If we cannot afford it, should it at least be shelved, if not scrapped altogether? The second problem is that architects have talked about how there's not enough information about what's really going to happen. Which of these buildings are going to be torn down? What will they be replaced with? What is the new plan going to look like? There is, of course, another problem of the fact that the buildings currently in that neighborhood hold our history. While, yes, they were built by the British, they're also a very strong and important part of independent India. And should we be tearing down these buildings and replacing them with new ones? Now, the government has made several arguments, even before the Supreme Court, where this matter has gone up, where the Supreme Court is now examining the environment clearance that has been granted to the Central Vista project, because, again, activists have said that many corners have been cut and many rules have been flouted in the granting of this environment clearance. The Supreme Court has asked for a fresh plea to be filed before it, which it will consider in August. But the Solicitor General Tushar Mehta, who's representing the central government, has argued that this is not a private industry construction. This is a central government construction. It's in national interest. And therefore, these sort of, he's actually said public-spirited individuals, which is granted a nicer way, a nicer thing about activists than we've heard in the past. We've heard, activists being called all kinds of things, basically saying that they're looking to delay the project that will bring us a great level of glory. So here are the questions that we're asking this evening about this project. Question number one, should we be spending 20,000 crore rupees right now in the middle of this pandemic? We're not even out of the pandemic. We don't know how long this is going to take. Remember, we crossed 15 lakh cases or 1.5 million cases in India just yesterday. Should we be holding off on this? Why is the government in such a hurry? Secondly, should the government open up this project for public consultation, which means give us the details of what you plan to do with architecture that belongs to us as a people. Let us decide. And three, was the environment clearance granted without following correct procedure? These are the questions that we're asking today, and to help us answer those questions, we have a panel of 4 experts. Amit Khemka is an advocate with the Supreme Court who bring in the legal point of view. Rajiv Bhakat is the founding partner of Studio Cody. He's an architect and an urban designer who brings in the architectural point of view and the historic point of view. Alpana Kishore, senior journalist and urban activist who's worked extensively for many, many decades on matters of national and public interest, will bring us the finer details of the problems in this case. And Rajiv Mishra is an RTI activist, and I personally like Rajiv Mishra's voice as the voice of the citizen. I welcome all of our panelists and our audience to this conversation. Let's get started. If I may start with Mr. Bhakat, please, who is the architect on the panel. I know that there is a laundry list that you've prepared of what you find most disturbing about this project, but let me just break it down one by one. Architecturally, again, the government has argued at one point that these buildings are old, that they're not fire safe, that they're a hazard. In that case, doesn't it make sense to knock them out and build them afresh?
Not at all. Just because buildings are unsafe today doesn't mean they cannot be made safe. All right. This is a process followed everywhere in the world where buildings are studied. A study or an audit is done of every single building, whether it's structural or for fires and so on and so forth. And the buildings can then be retrofitted to save them. This is usually a far cheaper process. And any common businessman in India or anywhere in the world can tell you this is actually the first option which is always examined. Can we save what is currently there? For that, we study it, publish a report. Experts usually do that. And then we decide whether it's to be demolished or not. And in this case, no such report, to my knowledge, exists.
Besides that, would you tell us, what are your other reservations about this project?
Well, there are many. There are many aspects which are issues in this project. There's the heritage aspect, there is the urban design aspect, there is the aspect of process and propriety. The heritage aspect is the easiest one to understand. This is in a zone 1 heritage, which is the highest priority in India, which essentially meant till this project came about that nothing was supposed to be touched without significant checking and validation. And the fact that a zone 1 project is happening is really a question mark. We are tearing down something which is Indian heritage, which is part of all of our lives and this country's history. And that's very difficult to sort of do and swallow all that easily. There is the urban design aspect as to, are we doing justice to one of the great democratic central spaces of the country? Are we creating a space which allows people, which doesn't block them off through security and securitization? Why are we sort of designing a space which is primarily intended for ministries and government officers? Why aren't we creating a great public space which allows people to go through continuously and freely, especially in this place, the heart of Indian democracy? There are environmental issues about how the clearances are happening. This is touted, and this is definitely going to be a massive, massive construction project in one of the world's most polluted cities. Has that been examined thoroughly in terms of what its impact is going to be? And many, many other issues which go through this entire project.
Right, and we'll get to all of them one by one. Ms. Alpana Kishore joins us as well. Ms. Kishore, the question of the amount of money that is being spent at this point and the clearances that the government has sort of pushed through in spite of the lockdown, is that cause for concern?
Well, I mean, obviously, we've highlighted the costs again and again. And I think more than that, I mean, the 20,000 crores is what we've been told. But more than that, of course, as Rajiv Bhakat just before me said so, is the environmental costs, which we haven't even begun counting yet. What is that going to cost the air of Delhi, the citizens of Delhi, and so on? But what also I have focused on earlier is that some of these things we've just finished building. I mean, the External Affairs Ministry, we finished building 5 years ago. The Prime Minister's house has barely been built for like 25 years or something. They've built a tunnel from the Prime Minister's house to Safdarjung Airport. They've got air cover in place. They must have spent crores and crores. There's an auditorium for 2,000 people. There is, I mean, all kinds of, at that time, the decision was made that Racecourse Road was going to be the final Prime Minister's home, because earlier the Prime Minister would just keep hopping around, you know, wherever the elected Prime Minister lived, that would become the PM's house. So instead of retrofitting each house separately, they decided, no, we're going to make Racecourse Road the Prime Minister's house, and we are going to, he's going to stay there. So the road was blocked off, landscaping was done, and of course, massive amounts fitted on making it, you know, security-wise, you know, a proper space for the Prime Minister of India. Now that was just 25 years ago. So I just don't understand, why do we need another Prime Minister's house and another, you know, day after somebody decides, I don't want to live on Rajpath, I want to live right next to India Gate. Is it just a whim? I mean, are these just whims? Does the Prime Minister just decide whenever he wants to? You know, I'm really not sure of this aspect of it either. Same with the External Affairs Ministry. You design it, you take care that it meets certain building or requirements. If, for instance, it doesn't cross a certain height. Now, if you see Bimal Patel's design for this, I think the most terrible part of this design is that the height of the buildings, he says, is not going to cross India Gate. But India Gate is way higher than the trees. So when you're lying down in India Gate, in the lawns of India Gate on a nice summer evening, having your ice cream, you're going to see these massive, huge Hulk buildings all around you, because they will cross the tree line. Right now, nothing crosses the tree line. You see the sky. So it's an open space. So really, I don't understand what is the cost, yes. But what is the point of doing all this? Why are we having a new Prime Minister's house? Why does he need a new house? I mean, I'm sure there are many, many things we can spend money on. Why does he need a new PMO? Why do we need a new, another house for the, you know, for the vice president or for whoever? Why do we need new houses for these people? Isn't Lutyens Delhi enough? You know, I mean, talk about being elitist. I think this is elitist nature of this project is what is the most bothersome aspect of it.
Do we know where the money is going to come from? What head of the government allocation is this money going to come from?
Well, good question. I'm not an economist, so I really don't know. And since the government owes money to lots of people, I really would like to know where this is coming from. I mean, why isn't it going towards servicing that debt first? You know, even to people like the armed forces and to, you know, there are other people more qualified than me who can list this, but there are people who are owed money, government employees, you know, people who have been, you know, sort of who have not been given their due purportedly because the government doesn't have enough money. So how do we have enough money to build this wonderful sort of project just like that out of thin air, you know?
Out of thin air, but out of 20,000 crore rupees of citizen money. And there's another problem that has been raised by many experts is that because the plan is so opaque, the actual estimate of what this is going to cost, whether it's going to be 20,000 crore or more than that, we don't really know, because
that's what I said, that 20,000 crores, what we've been told is the building cost. What about the rest of it? What about the cost of demolishing? What about the cost of pollution? You know, what about the cost of the traffic, increased traffic that's going to enter over there? You know, there are so many what you call them, invisible costs that you don't know about right now. And you'll only get to know as the project unfolds, and then it's too late.
And Alpana, do we have an idea of what the new plan is, what it looks like, whether has that been submitted or made public?
Well, again, the opaqueness of this presentation, I think the architectural firm in question has made, to my knowledge, only 2 presentations, both to closed audiences. So there are glimpses of it, and there's one interview here or there, but really nothing much. So there is no open question and answer or debate on this issue. Nobody can question them that, like, why is the height higher than the trees? Why are we doing that? Or why do we need so many things all together? I mean, this is the digital age and COVID, we're all managing at home. Why do we need everything together? Nobody's there to question anyone. So this opaqueness is so, again, I will say elitist. It's really elitist because the people are not being consulted at all. And this whole notion that Lutyens Delhi, which, the government has come in talking about Lutyens Delhi as this great den of elitist people. Well, they are the biggest elitists of them all,
I just want to ask Rajiv Bhakat a quick question before I take this to the rest of the panel. Rajiv, do you know anyone in the architectural community who was either a candidate in this contest, this design contest that was held for Central Vista, or a judge? I know this is a hearsay question because you don't know everybody in that community, but does the community know who participated?
Yes, that question is a little loaded because firstly, this wasn't really a competition. To call this a competition is a bit of a fallacy. This was more like a tender process, which in itself eliminates a lot of people from actually submitting their ideas, which is such a pity. Because you would have got such brilliant ideas from younger people. In the tender process, yes, we do certainly know of some of the people who participated in it. We know that 6 firms were shortlisted within the tender, and they submitted an entry within 3 weeks, which was then selected. Beyond that, there's little, like Alpana said, that we understand, because there have been very limited sort of presentations of the design actually behind closed doors. They've all been in closed forums. Nothing has been submitted to people. And the design, in fact, I've been to one of these presentations, is continuously changing. So there's very little to comment on in that as well.
Right, Amit, Khemka, I want to read out some of the questions that are coming in from our audience members. Bharat Raval says there's money, there seems to be money everywhere, but not enough for the government to invest in the right priorities. Tanvi D says, shouldn't the money be utilized to ramp up healthcare, which is really the matter of national interest? You're absolutely right. Well, Madhu just says good evening to everybody. Somebody else says, where's the money going to come from? And of course, the fact that the environment impact assessment draft has come just at the right time to sort of pass through that impact assessment as well. But Amit, Khemka, from the point of view of the Supreme Court, taking cognizance of this matter on the PILs that have been presented before it, what happens now if there is, the court has asked for a combined fresh petition to be filed? What does that mean? And what happens next?
I understand there is some order in which the court has said that whatever will be done will be subject to the final outcome of the petitions, whatever petitions are pending. I really, don't know if whatever money is spent during that time, even on consultations or even on, designs or planning, what happens to that? That is public money. So I think Supreme Court should have been more categorical about it. And then there are many petitions. It's not only one petition is the one where they have said that you refile it. There were some technical problems with it. So they have said you refile it. But other petitions are pending. In fact, some of the petitions which were in High Court, they have been transferred there. But let me come back, Faye, to the real thing. As Alpana said, whims is the key word. We don't know as to whose brainchild was it.
Yes.
We do
actually, we do. One second. Mr. Khemka, Hardeep Singh Puri, who is the Minister of Urban Development, at an event by India Today, actually said that this is a long-standing dream of the Prime Minister.
I don't know when Prime Minister conceived that dream, but the point is, in the government, you don't run a government on the dreams. You run government on logic. You run government on public exigency. So on one hand, you are saying that this whole project is coming because the buildings are unsafe. In 2013, CPWD said that this South Block was perfectly safe. In 2019, the same CPWD says that South Block is unsafe. In 2015, you are listing the whole project in World Heritage List. and you are submitting it to UNESCO, and now then you are withdrawing it. No, all this, if you see that how the logic has gone for a toss. Basically, you are wanting to change. After all, there is a master plan of Delhi. The master plan prescribes certain criteria. Master plan takes into account the larger picture of the things. And then you suddenly say, okay, we are changing the master plan. Now, what is that? How can you change the master plan? Unless there is something logical. You don't change it on a dream of, even if that person is prime minister of this country, you don't change the master plan on the dream, on the basis of the dreams. I would like to really ask my friend, Mr. Bhakat, I suppose,
Yes,
you are
Mr. Bhakat, yes. Yes.
He's not Bhagat, he's Bhakt. So,
Bhakat, please. Bhakat, not Bhakt. I'll take that distinction, please.
Yes, Mr. Khemka, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Please don't mind it. So what I'm just asking you, that can we not build a smart capital for 20,000 crores somewhere else? Would that not be a better idea? If 20,000 crores, if you are spending, I feel as a layman that 20,000 crores would be good enough for building a smart capital.
That's a Tughlakian idea if there ever was one. That's a Tughlakian idea if there ever was one. No, but Mr. Khemka,
maybe
you live in Delhi. No, Mr. Khemka, you live in Delhi. The Supreme Court is in Delhi. All of the offices of the government of India are in Delhi. And I know there are people who are attached, like yourself, attached to these institutions, who are having to breathe unhealthy air that is causing them to become very sick, but they can't leave because you work in the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court is in Delhi, so you can't leave the city. Why can't we spend this kind of money cleaning the air and doing whatever is necessary to save the city of Delhi and to make it habitable instead of making things worse, if this is really the impact? And I want to place another question before the panel, and I'll take this to Rajiv Mishra because I know, before I go there, Mr. Khemka, for you, one of our audience members say, can we stop paying taxes if we disagree with the way the government is spending the money?
Unfortunately, you cannot. There are now too many laws on the economic side, which even parliament panels have called as draconian laws. So if you today try to do any such thing, you can land up not only yourself with penalties and things, but you can even have an FIR or a criminal case lodged against you. So please don't do that. That is not advisable at all. Faye, let me tell you, if you go into the history, you will find that actually the courts and the capital can actually be, Supreme Court and the national capital can be at two different places altogether. It is not required that they should be at the same place. In fact, Delhi has today become a business capital. Delhi is no more a political capital. It is a capital of liaison people. It's a capital of dalals. So it would be better if the political capital is shifted out of this city. If at all the government has to, it will save itself from the liaison people. It will save itself from corruption. The government officers will be able to work in a healthier environment. So that would be much better to do actually.
So it's interesting. So you're saying take the 20,000 crore rupees and move the government elsewhere. Rajiv Mishra is with us. He's a citizen activist. Mr. Mishra, आपको क्या लगता है कि सेंट्रल विस्टा बनानी चाहिए? वैसे तो अंग्रेजों ने बनाया था ये बिल्डिंग्स, तो हमें क्यों संभाल के रखनी चाहिए? राजीव मिश्रा जी।
देखो फे, मैं तो सबसे बड़ी बात ये कहता हूँ कि ये ऐसी गवर्नमेंट है जिसको न हेरिटेज की चिंता है, न इसको पर्यावरण की चिंता है, न इसको अपने इकोनॉमिकल कंडीशंस की चिंता है। ये सारे चीजों के साथ कॉम्प्रोमाइज करके ये जो चीज ठान लेती है वो करने पर आमदा हो जाती है। जैसे आपको मैं बताऊं, ये 20,000 करोड़ का प्रोजेक्ट आप बता रही है सेंट्रल विस्टा का, जो हम लोग जानते हैं 1,10,000 करोड़ का बुलेट ट्रेन इन्होंने ठान लिया कि मुझे करना है। लोग लाख आवाज उठाते हैं, इनके ऊपर कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता। लोगों की आर्थिक स्थिति क्या है इससे इनका कोई लेना देना नहीं है। अभी मैं आपको बताऊं कि अभी वाणिज्य मंत्रालय का रिपोर्ट आया है कि इस समय में 10 करोड़ लोगों की रोजगार पर इफेक्ट पड़ने वाले हैं। 10 करोड़ लोगों का रोजगार प्रभावित होने वाला है। इससे इनको कोई लेना देना नहीं है। मिडिल क्लास का क्या स्थिति है इस वक्त इस कोविड के समय में, 4-5 महीनों से वो क्या झेल रहे हैं, दे नोज वेरी वेल। बट लेकिन इनके लिए सारी चीजें, सारा लॉकडाउन इनके लिए कोई मायने नहीं रखता, कोविड इनके लिए कोई मायने नहीं रखता। इनको जब चाहे रेलवे बेचना है रेलवे बेच दें, ये जब चाहे एयरपोर्ट बेचना है एयरपोर्ट बेच दें, ये जब चाहे कोयला बेचना है कोयला बेच दें, ये जब चाहे देश बेचना है देश बेच दें। मतलब ये हालात हो गई है आज लोगों की कि आप सबसे बड़ी बात से मैं सेंट्रल विस्टा पे आता हूं। सेंट्रल विस्टा प्रोजेक्ट जब आप दिल्ली के लिए ला रहे थे तो सबसे पहला जरूरी यह है कि उस लोकेलिटी के लोगों से आपने सजेशन एंड ऑब्जेक्शन मंगाए क्या, आपने सजेशन ऑब्जेक्शन मंगाया क्या। इस काम को जब आप अप्रूवल दे रहे थे उस वक्त इसका हिस्ट्री ऑफ जो बिल्डिंग्स है वो आपने मंगाया क्या, वो किस कंडीशन में है, उनका आर्किटेक्चरल सर्टिफिकेट इसके पहले कब जारी किया गया था, क्या क्या उसमें खामियां थी, क्या वो डिमोलिश के लायक है कि नहीं है, किसी आईआईटी संस्था से या किसी चीज से आपने रिपोर्ट मंगाया क्या। बिना इन सब चीजों को किए एक हेरिटेज सिचुएशन है वहां पे, लोग उसको मानते हैं कि ऐतिहासिक है, भले ही ये ब्रिटिश कालीन है लेकिन ऐतिहासिक है। और हम लोगों ने यह स्वीकार कर लिया है कि 100 इयर्स बिफोर के जो भी स्ट्रक्चर हैं वो हमारे लिए हेरिटेज का मायना रखते हैं। और जैसा कि अभी भक्त साहब बता रहे थे कि ये तो ग्रेड 1 का हेरिटेज है, अब ग्रेड 1 के हेरिटेज के साथ आप कॉम्प्रोमाइज कर रहे हो। आप इन्वायरमेंट, जो दिल्ली का इन्वायरमेंट आप सबको पता है कि वहां पर क्या स्थिति होती है एयर पॉल्यूशन वगैरह की और कैसे लोग बेचैन हो जाते हैं, वहां आप इन्वायरमेंट के साथ भी आप समझौता करने को तैयार हो। अभी आप स्वयं कह रहे हो कि हम राज्यों का जीएसटी दे पाने में असमर्थ हैं क्योंकि हमारे पास पैसा नहीं है। वैसी स्थिति में 20,000 करोड़ के प्रोजेक्ट को आप तुरंत पूरा करने को तैयार हो। ऐसा क्या इसेंशियल है इस प्रोजेक्ट में जिसको आप तुरंत करना चाहते हो। ये सब बातें ये बताती हैं कि ये गवर्नमेंट रिजिड है, इसको किसी चीज से कोई मतलब नहीं है। देश की स्थिति क्या है, लोग किस चीज के लिए मर रहे हैं, लोगों की जरूरत क्या है, लोगों की प्राथमिकताएं क्या है, इससे इसको कोई लेना देना नहीं है। फिर आपको मैं बता दूं कि इन लोगों ने जो एक पहला ऐसे प्रोजेक्ट में जो सबसे पहला जो षड्यंत्र होता है वो होता है कंसल्टेंट का। सबसे पहले कंसल्टेंट को एक रकम दे दी जाती है और एक रकम उसको फिक्स किया जाता है और वो उस हिसाब से बिना सारा क्लियरेंस लिए, ना तो एनजीटी का क्लियरेंस, ना तो एनवायरमेंटल क्लियरेंस, बिना क्लियरेंस लिए वो एक प्रोजेक्ट गवर्नमेंट के सामने रख देता है और गवर्नमेंट उस पर काम करना शुरू करती है।
राजीव कृष्णा जी, एक और बात मुझे आप पैनल के सामने रखनी है। वर्ल्ड बैंक ने अभी इंडिया डेवलपमेंट अपडेट करके एक ड्राफ्ट रिपोर्ट गवर्नमेंट को सौंपा है, सबमिट किया हुआ है। उसमें लिखा है कि इंडिया इज एट रिस्क ऑफ लूजिंग इट्स हार्ड वन गेन्स अगेंस्ट पॉवर्टी एंड इज लाइकली टू स्लिप बैक इनटू पॉवर्टी ड्यू टू जॉब लॉस ट्रिगर्ड बाय कोविड-19। उस रिपोर्ट में ये भी लिखा है, एक मिनट, इस रिपोर्ट में ये भी लिखा है कि अब हमारी सरकार ने जो 20 लाख करोड़ रुपए का जो स्पेंडिंग अनाउंस किया था उसमें एक्चुअली 20 लाख करोड़ रुपए की स्पेंडिंग नहीं थी। स्पेंडिंग, गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग कोविड के लिए बहुत कम हुई है और इसलिए लोगों को और जरा ज्यादा तो मतलब गरीब लोगों को बहुत दिक्कत होने वाली है, ये इनका कहना है। तो ऐसे अगर गवर्नमेंट स्पेंडिंग गरीबी पे नहीं हो रही है, कोविड पे नहीं हो रही है, हेल्थ केयर पे नहीं हो रही है, तो क्या अब ऐसे वक्त में ये सेंट्रल विस्टा प्रोजेक्ट हमारे लिए मान्य रखता?
देखो फे, इस गवर्नमेंट को अगर आप बस चले ना तो आपको जो सैलरी मिलती है ना उसको भी ये बोलेंगे कि हम मदद कर रहे हैं लोगों को। आप काम कर रही हैं, आपका जो सैलरी फिक्स है वो भी अगर आप पा रही हैं तो वो भी गवर्नमेंट की मदद है। इसका ये हालत गवर्नमेंट का है। ये ऐसी ऐसी चीजों को गवर्नमेंट हेल्प बता रही है जो पहले से हमारी योजनाओं में शामिल थी और पहले से ही हम गरीबों को इस तरह की मदद दे रहे थे। अपने राष्ट्रीय जो भी राष्ट्रीय सरकार हुआ करती थी वो कर रही थी या स्टेट गवर्नमेंट थी वो कर रही थी। लेकिन इनको क्या है, इनको ये बताना है कि हमने 20 लाख करोड़ रुपया गवर्नमेंट मतलब पब्लिक के ऊपर खर्च किया, जबकि उसमें से जब आप पूरा कैलकुलेशन करेंगी तो उसमें से मैक्सिमम आपको, मैं कहता हूं कि 5% आपको ऐसा मिलेगा जिसमें आपको लगेगा कि गवर्नमेंट हेल्प है।
Okay, I just want to take this question back to Alpana, Kishore. Alpana, there is a report that came out as well that the government notified a change on the 20th of March of 7 plots of land around the Central Vista. 5 of them, in fact, earlier was public land for public usage, and only one was a government office building. All of those plots of lands have now been recategorized as office government plots. So is this also in some way taking away land from the citizens, land that the citizens were able to walk on, like you said, sit on the grass and eat ice cream on, generally take their families to on a Sunday evening? That land is also being taken away from citizens?
Look, I think, like I said before, the whole project has nothing to do with the people of India. It has only to do with, I would say, even certain sections of government. It's not even, it's not even for the government. It's a very personally driven project. And so it has nothing to do with me or you, or anybody on the streets, or anyone who enjoys India Gate, or any citizen of India. It's got to do with the personal issues of somebody who has the power to do what they would like to do, to fulfill their own dream. So it's whimsical. It's not egalitarian. It's not democratic. It's nothing, like I said, it's nothing public spirited. It's a very, very personal issue. So logic doesn't come into it. Now, when logic doesn't come into it, and we are taking away a zone 1 heritage area, we are sort of just doing away with it, no public consultation, no procedures followed, the laws are so strict for zone 1. You can't touch literally a leaf. And here we are demolishing things. We are breaking them down. When you can't even pluck a leaf in a zone 1 heritage area. And in a month, the clearances have all come through. How is that? That's not possible. How have institutions like DOAC or the ASI, how have they given their permission? How have they just said, all right, you can do this? It's impossible. It's only clearance at some super high level, and the willingness of all institutions to fall in line, which I'm afraid is what has happened. So those institutions are letting down the people of India. We are not able to rely on those institutions to give us that kind of public spirited result that we should get. But I think the larger picture here is, how are we as a country, we pride ourselves, at least since independence, of being a very rational, moderate, progressive state. We are not a backward state. We are not a medieval state where things are done by Farman or by Rajhat or something like that. That's not it. We are not. In fact, you always look down on Pakistan because of its dictatorships and its volatile history, and all kinds of sort of odd types of governments coming in, dictatorial and military, etc. But we have always followed the path of rationality. Now I'm afraid we are not following that path of rationality, and we look as good or bad as any of these sort of states that we question all the time. And so does the world. The world will then slot you into those categories as well, that India is sort of like the, sort of a basket case as well, because I'm going to bring in something which nobody's ever mentioned before, but the Taliban in Afghanistan blew up the Bamiyan Buddhas. Okay.
Yes.
So, okay, we're not blowing up anything, and we're not doing anything of the sort.
Yes.
But they also assure us that we are not blowing up and we are not destroying parliament, we are not destroying. So, so what's the problem? We are just adding on, we are not subtracting. But you are destroying that ethos. You are destroying the heritage as it was supposed to exist. And everything that this architectural firm says that is going to bring in, which is supposedly what Lutyens said in his vision in 1920, is wrong. So the architectural firm said that, we are going to bring in, Lutyens wanted to build this entire zone. So we are just fulfilling what his original plan was. But he wanted to build up public spaces like theaters, like museums, like spaces where the public would congregate. He wasn't going to build government offices there. Then they said, the trees are all finished. We are going to plant them just like Lutyens said they would. But actually, they chose the wrong trees. It's like a comedy of errors, They're quoting Lutyens left, right, and center, but they're not getting any of his plans right. They're not doing anything of the sort. And the whole argument that this is British and therefore it's not, for symbolism is everything. For 70 years, our parliament, our elected leaders have sat in this parliament. And our elected leaders have lived in Rashtrapati Bhavan. It is called Rashtrapati Bhavan. It is based on Mughal architecture, the Jali work, and there are many things that I'm sure Rajiv can tell you on this show, that correspond to our Indian ethos. So we have accepted it as ours. Now, how do we just say, oh, 70 years, it was nothing. It was absolutely nothing, you know?
So actually, Rajiv, that was the next question I was coming to you with. And this has been a matter of sort of debate world over. In the Czech Republic, for example, in Prague, there are several buildings that were built during the communist period of their history, which was a painful period of their history. And there was a debate in that government of, should we tear this down because we don't want to remember that period of our history? But they also decided that, no, this is the entire consolidated history of this country, and we shouldn't forget any part of it. Like Germany refuses to allow itself to forget Hitler because they believe that this was errors that were made that shouldn't be made again. So the question of whether we should hang on to what was built by the British, and if we are going to make that argument to do with Delhi, then Victoria Memorial, then the Chhatrapati Shivaji train station in Mumbai, most of South Mumbai, several parts of Bangalore will then also have to come under question. Are we going to, wipe out our history and build it again? Are we rewriting who we are? What does this mean? And there is a relationship between the architecture of a country and the people of that country. What would this mean for us if it did happen?
Well, it would mean a certain kind of disaster. And like you rightly said, it is wiping out history or attempting to wipe out history in a certain way. And the idea that this space is entirely colonial is also a false one. These are Indian hands that made these buildings. These are Indian materials. This was Indian labor. These are Indian motifs. It's inspired by Indian architecture, right? The names on the walls of India Gate, although that's not on the demolition list, thank God, are Indian soldiers. And we should never forget that, right? And that's just the pre-independence module. And the post-independence module is that they're actually demolishing a lot of buildings which were built post-independence, which does not come into this gambit at all. They're really not colonial buildings at all. They're part of the plans are to demolish the IGNCA, which is a very contemporary building, built only in the 80s and the 90s. To say that they're demolishing and removing history in itself is a terrible thing. We should not forget where we come from. And the second part of that is that this place is as Indian as it is colonial. We cannot forget that and erase that from our history. And thereafter, there have been 70 plus years of independence in history where we have seen Republic Day parades and had ice creams and gone boating and protested in this space. This space is Indian. This is not just Indian, but this is India. You cannot simply say we're going to demolish parts of it as quite as easily as that. And that's a little bit of a travesty there, Faye.
Also, before we go back to the rest, again, overseas, there is, there's a great deal of effort that's put in restoring buildings, modernizing them, making them fire safe, making them spaces where people can continue to work and live so that they stay relevant. Do you believe that enough has been done to in these cases to make that effort?
I don't think it's even been started. To my knowledge, no real public report exists on any of these studies in these buildings. If the report existed, we would have a sense of what the danger is, or if there isn't one. Right now, there seems to be a blanket judgment that they're so dangerous that they need to be demolished. Even if they are dangerous, even if there are dangers, it's fairly easy to retrofit buildings. There is a cost and a process, but it's far, far less costly than demolishing and building anew. And that's absolute common sense. That doesn't even need an architect to tell you that. My clients tell me that when they come to me, can we please save the building? And if we can't, then we demolish. But first, you always study.
Rajiv, Mishra, आपको कुछ बोलना था? बोलिए.
कि ये जो प्लॉट्स हैं, इसमें से कई प्लॉट्स ऐसे हैं जो पब्लिक प्लॉट्स हैं. तो पब्लिक प्लॉट्स का अगर आप रिजर्वेशन चेंज करेंगी, तो सबसे पहले तो आपको अपने डीपी प्लान को चेंज करना पड़ता है. और डीपी प्लान को आप तब तक चेंज नहीं कर सकती जब तक आप पब्लिक सजेशन एंड ऑब्जेक्शन न मंगा लें. तब तक आप डीपी प्लान में कोई चेंजेज नहीं ला सकती. तो ऐसे में कैसे ये सब चीजें हो रही हैं, और क्या इसको लेकर के जो लोग सुप्रीम कोर्ट में गए हैं, क्या इन्होंने ये मांगा है कि इम्पैक्ट असेसमेंट रिपोर्ट किया गया है कि नहीं, पब्लिक सजेशन एंड ऑब्जेक्शन मांगा गया है कि नहीं, ये सारी चीजों का संकलन करके इस प्रोजेक्ट को मंजूरी दी गई है कि नहीं. इन्वायरमेंटल क्लियरेंस इज ऑल्सो वेरी मस्ट. फिर हेरिटेज का संरक्षण, ये भी बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट है. तो ये सारी चीजों के साथ आज जो गवर्नमेंट कॉम्प्रोमाइज कर रही है, और उसको अगर सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने स्टे नहीं दिया, फिर माफी के साथ बोलूंगा और सुप्रीम कोर्ट से माफी मांगते हुए आपके चैनल पे बोलूंगा कि मुझे लगता है कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट को जब तक ये पूरा एग्जामिन नहीं कर लेना चाहिए तब तक इस प्रोजेक्ट को स्टे देना चाहिए था, जो के कारण कम से कम अगर मान लो वो प्रोजेक्ट चालू रहता है, उसमें अगर 25 करोड़ भी खर्च हो जाते हैं, 30 करोड़ भी खर्च हो जाते हैं, तो वो नेशनल लॉस है। अगर वो किसी एक खास कॉन्ट्रैक्टर का भी जा रहा है तो भी नेशनल लॉस है, क्योंकि वो उसमें पैसा लग रहा है। मेरा ऐसा मानना है कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट को बिना एग्जामिनिंग के इसको स्टे रोकना चाहिए था, और रोकने के बाद सारी चीजों का एग्जामिन करने के बाद फिर या तो इस पर ग्रीन सिग्नल दे या इसको रोक दे। ऐसा मेरा मानना है कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट को यह करना चाहिए था, जो आज नहीं हुआ।
Alpana, Kishore, do you also hope that there is a stay on this project, or do you think at this point we'd be better off if it was scrapped altogether?
I have always maintained that there is no need for this project at all. So the question that don't do it at this time because there's COVID, or don't do it do it some other time, or wait for, there is no need for it. Absolutely. If anything, we should be looking at decentralizing power rather than centralizing. This is such an old-fashioned, ancient notion from, I don't know, some, it's like last century by a mile, that we need to centralize things. Not at all. I mean, if anything, COVID has showed us we don't need to centralize anything at all. We can sit at home and we can do our work pretty damn well. So to me, I've always said that forget about a need. This is not about need. There's no question of need. Like I think somebody said during the program that 2013, they declared that South Block was safe, and suddenly 2019, they say it's unsafe. These are just excuses. These are just, justifications. The point is that this is based on a whim. And so, of course, it's not based on a need. So if it's not based on a need and it's not in the public interest, I mean, why should we have it at all? The British Parliament, for instance, not only is it the first British Parliament was 800 years old. So they kept that parliament for 800 years. It was destroyed in a fire. Then in the last century, they rebuilt it just as it was before. And now it's lasted 200 years. And now it's time for a refurbishment again. And so they're doing this refurbishment, and it's going to take them 12 years. So if, these are the world-class standards of heritage conservation. It takes time. It takes 12 years. And the British Parliament is going to move out to a convention center like Pragati Maidan while this building is going on, or while this retrofitting is going on. And it's going to come back to the same parliament, because that's a huge symbol of British democracy. And that is the way heritage conservation is done around the world. You don't do it in this slap bang kind of fashion where you just take clearances at breakneck speed. You do a false competition and get the guy you want and, chuck him into the arena, and he starts building plans. Within a month, he's ready for this project of such gargantuan proportions. He's ready with plans in a month. And, everything is shot to pieces. Your heritage zone proposal to UNESCO is torn to shreds. I mean, agar कानून का इतना उल्लंघन करना ही है, तो then why not citizens भी करें? Why shouldn't I be allowed to build any extension I want in my house? Why shouldn't I live on the road or create a house or, do what I want? Why should only the government be allowed to do these things?
Mm-hmm. Do you believe also, Alpana, that the choice of architect in this particular project is also worrisome, or the manner in which that choice came about?
You see, the choice is a long-standing one. It's not a new choice. The same architect has been used to redo Ahmedabad, to redo Banaras, and in my opinion, disastrously, in a very, in a sort of, I would almost say, blasphemous way in terms of heritage conservation. When you're going about heritage conservation, you really have to be so finessed. This is like a brutal sweep, and that's the same thing that's going to happen in Central Vista. So, I mean, the choice of the architect, I mean, come on, there should be a competition. There should be young people invited. I mean, this is like the Pompidou Center in Paris. Some of the greatest talents in the world of architecture were discovered because these young guys came and, submitted a design, which was then taken up for, to build. So, I don't see why such an open competition like the one for IGNCA, when it was held years ago. I mean, that set a benchmark. That's how you should do competitions. And this should be a year or 2 year long process. Everybody should be involved, not just the Prime Minister, not just the Urban Development Minister. It should be us. We should be involved. Why are we not involved? You know, I want to give my opinion.
That brings me to the next question that Bharat is asking on this on our chat window, and that is, why is the opposition not lifting their voice, not raising their voices against this? Is there anything that citizens can do? And anyone on the panel who wants to answer this question, what can be done now? I mean, are we to just go, you know, lock arms and stand in front of the bulldozers now, or can there something be done before it reaches that point?
Well, I would love to have greater, you know, large scale awareness of this and some kind of protest. Yes, absolutely. There should be, you know, people willing to get onto that, you know, get onto that strip of Central Vista and protest like they have for you know, such important things in our republic. You know, like I'm remembering the rape case, and you know, I'm remembering our Republic Day, I mean our Independence Day celebrations, our 50th Independence Day celebrations. You know, we've been there in sickness and health, and in joy and in sadness and grief and everything. So that Central Vista means a whole deal to us. Of course, there should be people there, and yes, social media should take it up. There should be. I mean, I'm ready to join any activist sort of group who has the power or the, you know, ability to start a campaign like this. You know, and I think the young people should bring it forward. You know, they are the ones who can mobilize social media like nothing else.
To the other guests as well, Rajiv, Bhakat, do you expect that you know, only now protests can stop, or do you think that the Supreme Court should step in? What would you like to see happen in this case?
Well, what I'd like to see is a little more public awareness and a little more public participation. There are small groups, which are few and far between, which are taking up the issues. I don't think the information about what is happening is really out there. I don't think people realize how much of an outrage this really is. I think people need to be informed. I think people can multiply the information on social media beautifully in this day and age. I don't think all hope is lost. Yes, of course, things are in the Supreme Court of India at this moment, but we cannot believe in a democracy that all hope is lost. We are the people of India. There are things which we can definitely do.
Right, Rajiv, Mishra, आपकी अभी क्या अपील होगी जनता से इस मामले में?
फिर मैं तो इतना बोलूंगा कि देखो, हम लोग चूंकि इसलिए सह रहे हैं क्योंकि हम सड़कों पे नहीं आ रहे हैं। आज जरूरत है कि हमको किसी पॉलिटिकल पार्टी की जरूरत नहीं है। आज कम से कम अगर 150 जो एक्टिविस्ट हैं, सोशल एक्टिविस्ट हैं, कम से कम ये अपने साथ, मुझे मालूम है अगर ये एक साथ उतरेंगे सड़कों पे तो निश्चित पब्लिक भी इनके साथ आएगी। आज जितने भी रिनाउंड जिनको सोशल एक्टिविस्ट हम लोग मानते हैं, जिनका नाम पूरे देश में लोग जानते हैं सोशल एक्टिविज्म में, ऐसे लोगों को आज एक साथ अपना ईगो छोड़ देना है, अपना ट्रस्ट छोड़ देना है कि मेरे ट्रस्ट के द्वारा करेंगे तो उसके ट्रस्ट के द्वारा करेंगे, ये सारी बातों को छोड़नी होगी और यूनाइटली सारे लोगों को एक होकर के कुछ अच्छे एक्टिविस्ट को सामने आना पड़ेगा और रोड पर उतरना पड़ेगा। आपको मालूम है, मैं आपको बताना चाहता हूं कि जैसे रामलीला मैदान में अन्ना हजारे जब उतरे थे, आपको याद होगा कि उस घटना ने कांग्रेस को सत्ता से बाहर कर दिया और कांग्रेस का इंप्रेशन इतना हर्ट हुआ कि आज तक कांग्रेस बैक नहीं हो पाई है। तो ये जन आंदोलन का नतीजा था। केजरीवाल मुख्यमंत्री बन गए, लेकिन आज ये सब लोग खामोशी साधे हैं। तो ये परफेक्ट सिचुएशन है जब हम सब सोशल एक्टिविस्टों को एक मंच पे आकर करके और हम लोगों को इसके खिलाफ आंदोलन करना चाहिए। सेंट्रल विस्टा जैसे प्रोजेक्ट का या फिर और भी जो मुद्दे हैं, इसमें एक यूनिटी जो है वो सोशल एक्टिविस्टों की होनी चाहिए, एनजीओज की होनी चाहिए। जब ये सब एक मंच पे आएंगे तभी जाकर के फिर हमारी लड़ाई और जनमत की लड़ाई जिसको बोलते हैं वो सफल हो पाएगी। अदरवाइज आप जिस पॉलिटिकल पार्टी पे भरोसा करें वो अंत में आपको धोखा ही देता है।
All right, I'm going to thank my panelists here, but I will remind our audience of something very important. Remember that all of these buildings are your buildings. They belong to you. And while you own these buildings, they're not ours to demolish. We're actually custodians of these things for the next generation. We are supposed to make decisions about whether to keep something or demolish something that will affect the next generation. We inherited these buildings from our parents and our grandparents. We have to pass it on to the next generation. It's the same thing with our forests. It's the same thing with our natural resources. So all I'm going to ask our audience today is to be more involved. You are not helpless in a democracy. You are the citizen, you are the boss. Everybody answers to you. So be more involved, read more about it. There is so much information about the Central Vista project all over the internet. Read about it, keep yourself informed, and then form a strong opinion and act on it. Talk about it, act on it, write about it, write to the government, write as many letters as you want to, write to editors of newspapers, put up videos if you want to, voice your opinion, because you don't want to be the generation that squandered what we inherited and don't have an answer to give our children when they ask us what we were doing when this was happening. Be involved, make a decision. You might decide that this is a good thing. You might decide it's a bad thing, but not having an opinion and not knowing enough about what's going on in our country is really bad for the democracy. This is something we can actually change, and we must make it a point to do so. Also, tomorrow we're going to take up the new national education policy of the government. We're not doing it tonight because we want to give ourselves 24 hours to read through the whole thing, to talk to our experts and fully understand it before we take it up. That's really, we should be able to do justice. It's a 54-page document that affects students from across the country. So we want to be able to do justice to that document. So that's tomorrow. So pass the word around. But for tonight, I want to thank the panelists for being so generous with their time and explaining this matter to us so clearly. I want to thank my audience as well for coming in and being so supportive. Thanks for watching. Good night.